Hello and welcome to the introduction of chemical reactions. Please look in your unit packet on the page 2. Evidence of a chemical reaction. So in order for us to determine that a chemical reaction has taken place, one of these 5 things or a combination of these 5 things would be evident. Temperature change, so getting warmer or cooler. A color change. Sometimes you can see that right out, and sometimes it takes an indicator to observe that. We'll see what an indicator is in a lab later on in this unit. A precipitate is formed. A precipitate is when I put 2 liquids together and a solid comes out of that solution. So putting 2 liquids together that don't have any solid particles floating in them, excuse me, and when I combine them, I form a precipitate. We will also be looking at this a little bit deeper later on in the unit. A gas is produced. You'll see gas bubbles. This isn't just air bubbles. This is actual liberated gas bubbles. You can see it generated over moments or seconds or minutes. And an odor is produced. So any or all of these could be an indicator, or some of these could be an indicator of a chemical reaction. Please fill these in on page 2. If you've ever looked at a chemical reaction, you may have noticed something in parentheses at the end of each of the pieces of that balanced equation or that chemical reaction. I will show you how we will use these again later on in the unit. This is just sort of the introduction. But the states of matter, so whether something is a solid, liquid, or gas, is indicated and is important in a chemical reaction to know how it reacts, and sometimes certain solids, liquids, and gases can do something different depending on what state of matter they're in. So if you have a chemical formula, either an element or a compound, and after it you have an S in parentheses, that indicates that whatever that is a solid. If it has an L, it's a liquid. If it has a G, it's a gas. I could also indicate a gas right here with a arrow pointing up, so either a G after it or an arrow pointing up. This sort of shows that the gas would be going up to the top of the test tube. Aqueous is going to be ions in solution. We'll talk about all of these in much greater detail later, but for now I just want you to be familiar with the terms. AQ means aqueous, ions in solution. Those are positive and negative charges that are floating around in solution or in a liquid, might you say. And then the last one, it would be a precipitate. And the reason the arrow is pointing down is to show that if I had a solid, it would form that was in the solution, or a solid that was with a liquid, it would sink to the bottom for most cases. So a precipitate, or a PPT, that's abbreviation for precipitate, and it's solid formed in a solution. Next, I wanted to talk to you about a chemical reaction. So this arrow in the middle represents the center, or the fulcrum, or the focus point of the balance of a chemical reaction or a balanced equation. We have reactants on the left of the arrow, then the arrow points to the products. So I need you to fill in your chart the pieces that are missing, and I think it's very helpful to add the piece at the end there that says arrow points to the products. I need you to know the reactants are before the arrow, the products are after the arrow when we have a single arrow reaction. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is that a plus symbol separates reactants from reactants, and from products from products. So a plus symbol separates the reactants on the left, and I could have more than one plus sign. Normally it's just one, sometimes there's more. And on the right, I could have a plus sign that separates the products. So plus sign separates reactants from reactants and products from products. And then what separates the reactant side, as you saw on the last slide, from the product slide is an arrow. So an arrow separates reactants and products, and pluses separates reactants and products and products. And then the last thing I want you to define on these sets of notes is what a coefficient is. A coefficient is a number that appears in front of a reactant or a product. So a number that appears in front of an element or a compound in a balanced equation. Now, I know the term balanced equation is new. It's going to become familiar to you in the next few weeks.